Hello and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. That's me, and this is my podcast about finding our success in the gift of who we truly are. Now, these are conversations with people who know what that looks and feels like and how they got there. And I hope that this becomes an inspiration to you, to me, to everybody, to find ways to use our unique gifts to pursue our passions, make our dreams come true, and engage with the world in the way that we were created to serve. Now, as I always say, I hope this gets deep because that's where we find the good stuff, but don't get it twisted. This is about the fun of life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's be brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is a beast. He is the CEO and chief historian at Chicago Mahogany Tours. He is an Emmy-winning, passionate, self-taught urban historian who has been studying Chicago's history, architecture, and culture for over 20 years. He has become very well known for promoting the city to the world through his candid and captivating storytelling on his tours, social media accounts, and his work as a contributor on WBEZ, Chicago Public Radio, and his many guest appearances on local and national media. He has been honored with numerous awards and accolades, including the Landmarks Illinois Influencer, City of Chicago's Tourism Ambassador of the Year, Studs Terkel Uplifting Voice recipient, and the 21st Century Award from Chicago Public Library. He's a proud union man, a member of Omega Psi Phi. He's a husband and father, and he embodies the essence of this great city and his message that everything dope about America comes from Chicago. I am honored and happy to welcome Shermann Dilla Thomas, six-figure Dilla, to the Fearless Authenticity podcast. How you doing, love?
I'm doing amazing. I'm listening to that bio. I'm like, who in the heck are they talking about?
You. Listen, I worked with a lot of comedians. I tell this to people all the time. I work with a lot of comedians, and I believe in giving people their flowers on stage right now in this moment, because what you do for the city, Dilla, is, and for Black people in this city, is just beautiful.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I tell people all the time, I feel like I'm robbing folks, right? Because I'm getting paid to tell other people's stories. I'm not the one who created the history. I'm just retelling it and bringing it back to the forefront. And I genuinely feel like I owe Chicago way more than Chicago could ever give me, just being born here, the experiences that I've had, the people I've gotten to meet, the way that I feel when I'm somewhere else because of the way the battery that Chicago puts in my back, right, is why I think I've been successful. So,
yeah,
thank you.
I love it. Because, the thing is, even because, I never say that I am a native Chicagoan, because I'm not. Because if you can't say where you went to grammar school and high school, I don't care how many years I've lived here. But, it took me a while to feel like I was a Chicagoan, that Chicago had put its print on me. What is it that you think is so special about this city that creates so much dopeness? Like, because that is one of my favorite things about the posts you do and the stories you tell, is you connect Chicago to the world. And especially now that Chicago has become this political whipping boy for whatever reason, I don't know how we were this easy target, but because we're not an easy target,
right.
But what is it that you think is about Chicago's personality that creates all these amazing things and also can withstand the pressure of being, vilified?
The way I describe us is you're really paying attention. We're we're America's oldest major child when you think about it. Because before there was an America, there was a New York. Before there was an America, there was a New Orleans. There was an LA. There was all these major cities. But we become a thing as America has. Not only did the Revolutionary War, but we won the War of 1812, which was the last war we had with Great Britain. And so when you're the baby to a thing, all the innovation can be tried out. They already had it figured out on how they wanted things to work in New York, and it really still kind of works that way. But with Chicago, we don't gotta just build wide, right? We can build up. We can try these things called skyscrapers, because who's gonna hurt? Who's gonna see it? We're in Chicago, right? We don't have to follow so many of the Jim Crow laws. We can put black DJs on the air. When they close Storyville in New Orleans, we can have black and white jazz artists performing at the same place. So it's a lot of that innovation that makes us so unique, but that also makes us a target for folks, right? Because when you don't understand something, you criticize it or you question it. They can't figure out how, as much as they throw stuff at Chicago, we still standing. As much as they like to cite that Illinois is losing residents, what they don't cite is that the residents that are coming in are young tech professionals that prefer to live in Chicago and work their New York job, their LA job online versus living in those places. And then just being in the middle of the country, you get a little bit of everything. So you get people from the South that have been here via the Great Migration. You get a lot of European migrants and immigrants that came here because it's a little cheaper to be here than New York when you're getting off that boat at Ellis Island. So you got a mixture, the perfect melting pot that allows us to be collaborative, but also innovative. And I think that's why Chicago is still standing strong.
I love it. I love it. My big question for you is, and this is something I've wondered since I discovered you on social media, do you feel like telling Chicago, I know you have a day job, you work with ComEd, but do you feel like telling Chicago stories is like your mission, your calling, what you were meant to do in life?
I do. I'm just mad it took for me to be a middle-aged dude to figure out like what's my life calling, but I absolutely feel that way. And when I think about who I've always been doing that. When I was a meter reader for ComEd, when I first started out, if I saw a group of people staring at one building, but the building next to them was more historic, I'd be like, hey, I know you're here to see this, but you should probably check out this because this is where the time zones were invented, right? People do it all the time. The example is right there. You go down to the original Board of Trade, and everybody does the Batman Forever pose in the middle of the street, and all the weddings take the pictures there. And right on the corner of Jackson and LaSalle is a small plaque that lets you know that in the 1870s, Chicago set the time zones for the country, right? And so I've always done that. I've learned to not be so rude. If I see the people on the Segway tours, I would sometimes just hijack their tour. Well, yeah, I know you're talking about this, but that honorary street sign is named after the person that gave us the street grid, right? His name is Edward Brennan. I would get in so much trouble with my parents. We'd be walking somewhere and they'd be still walking and I'll be stopped reading a plaque or a sign or something. So it's always been in me. I've like my entire life, if I'm going to visit somebody and I know they tell me their address, I immediately want to know, why is Aberdeen, right? Like it drives me crazy until I find out why that street is named that. So it took for the pandemic and TikTok to kind of give me that vehicle to tell all this stuff I've been collecting over 20 years, but I'm happy it happened. And yeah, I think that's what I'm here for.
Oh, I love that story so much. I mean, how old were you when this started? Like, when did you discover that drive to know what Aberdeen was or to do that? Because it sounds like if you're talking about being with your parents and lagging behind, you had to have been young.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say easily 8, 9 years old. And my dad was a bit of a history maker himself. He was a vice president of the African American Police League. He was once bodyguard to Mayor Harold Washington. He was a bodyguard to Carol Moseley Brown when she was running for U.S. Senate. And when he would have me around these history makers, they'd be talking history. And I'm sure you can relate. If you can't keep up with adult conversation, you got to get out, right? And first of all, they don't even really want you talking. But if you're going to interject, it better be had some value or your parents going to kick you out. And so I would always like load up on Chicago facts. And that way, when they got to talking, if it came around to me, I could say to Carol Moseley Brown, you're ready to be the first Black woman U.S. senator, just like Oscar DePriest was the first Black man of the North to be a congressman from Chicago, right? And then that would always stop the room. But more importantly, my dad would give me that, okay, that look. And so I've been chasing his look, when he was here for my life.
Oh my God, that's beautiful, Dilla. That is beautiful because then that piece you talk about being a child in adult conversation, because like I'm an only child. So I was often the only child in adult conversations. And a lot of times, like what some grandparents were like, used to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember pushing the envelope with that. And I never thought about it until you just said it, about how that trains you to talk to people about the things you're passionate about in a way that people will pay attention, because you were getting tested before you were 10.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Very, very much so. And then once the adults learn that you can kind of hold your own and add value to the conversation, then they ask you for your opinion. And that empowers you to want to learn more, to be asked more.
Right. Is that how you approach raising your children? I mean, because
Yeah.
I'm sure they're all different personalities,
Yeah.
and you got to adjust to all, because I love your stories when you talk about them. But was that kind of the approach you've taken with them?
Yeah, how my wife and I, you know, when you go bowling, you take your kids bowling, and so they put the bumpers in the gutter. That's how we raising our kids. We just trying to keep them out the gutter, and they gonna make their own way down the alley. And so we allow for them to make mistakes. We allow for them to speak how they feel, and it's I can see the difference, right? Even when I'm around other people's children. My kids are naturally inquisitive. They want to know the answer to something. They don't mind doing the research to figure it out. And they're kind of mad if you don't have the answers when they asking you questions, right? Like, you're supposed to stop what you're doing right there and let's find this answer together. And since the whole TikTok thing, that's grown like exponentially. You know, I'm raising a bunch of little mini historians in here now.
Well, it sounds like it's a family trust. If it came from your father to you and it's being passed on, like maybe that's just y'all legacy to be doing that.
You know, I would be okay with that, right? The great historian Tamil Black, who was a 102-year-old historian here in Chicago, he's the reason why we know anything about Bronzeville, because he was like a first-person spectator to most of it. And when I met him, he was like, every generation needs griots, you know? And the second we stop having people that keep the history and can retell the history, we're going to be making those same historic mistakes. But also other people are going to tell us that it didn't happen. And so, you know, I'd be cool if I'm raising the next generation griots.
I want to talk about that for a second, because this is a conversation, especially with what's going on in the world, this being an election year and this election feeling so crucial in a lot of different ways. We end Black History Month, and even with this one extra day, because I don't know about you, but I start celebrating. Black History Month is year round, but I start celebrating at King Day so I can get all my days in.
Yeah.
But in a year like this, we talk about how history repeats itself. And I remember my mama used to tell, and I didn't understand it until I was older, about how we are doomed to repeat things because we don't understand our history in context. And one thing I love about your work is how you tell our city stories in a way that is not arm's length, and it's not from an outsider. It's very personal. It's very involved. It tells me as much about you as it does about the city. And I think you also connect it to how the place in the world, because like you did a post about the current immigrant crisis that I thought was so insightful. And it was based on how we got to this point as a city in Chicago, this city of immigrants from all different kinds of places for different reasons, and how that is part of our strength. That I don't think a lot of people were thinking about, because everybody was kind of navel gazing, and still are in a lot of ways when it comes to these busloads of people who are in unfortunate circumstances, not realizing the threads that connect us. How do you see power in history? You know, they say, you know, to the ones who win the war get to tell the story.
Right.
Those in power often gatekeep. Has there ever been a time in your research that you didn't necessarily feel valued or centered in the history? And how do you shift that? And how do you see the power of knowing history?
Sometimes it's one that's like a really, really deep question. I knew he was gonna go deep. Lordy, Lordy. That's
You
really
go
deep.
deep though too, Dilla. Don't act like you don't.
I'm sometimes because, like you say, I'm trying to represent all of Chicago. I mean, I'm Black. I can't help it. I'm 6'5". I got locks. I love Harold's Chicken. I live in a bungalow on the South Side, right? So I'm Black. Ain't nothing. I wear Jordans everywhere, right? So I'm Black. But I'm also a Chicagoan, so I try to learn the history of the city in its totality. And sometimes I'll be they used to produce these neighborhood fact books in the 1950s. The University of Chicago did. So if I'm doing historical deep dives, I'll go to that source. And nothing breaks your heart more than when they're listing out the ethnicities of a neighborhood, and then when they get to Black or when they get to Negro, it's not capitalized. But just stuff like that kind of stabs you with, man, they don't see us. Man, they don't appreciate us. And so I've learned to use that source for what it is. If they are capitalizing the Polish, right, then I know that I can at least keep and use that Polish knowledge that I'm learning. But I also have to remember that once it gets to the Black portion, that person isn't writing it from a place of appreciation or even equality. And that sometimes pushes me a little further to make sure that I tell our portion of that story. And there's such an amazing power in that, because I think history unites us, that shared history, shared perspective. The example, just in present day history, we just had NASCAR here last summer. I know a lot of people in the city was against it, but NASCAR has a particular demographic of people that are certainly not necessarily fans of Chicago, right? And for our children that are growing up here, that are going away to historically Black colleges and going to the South as a large NASCAR base, they're going to have to interact with each other, right? You might end up needing a job for one of them. And what I saw over and over again was the visitors here for NASCAR will have a bud on 22nd in Michigan eating jerk Villa, and they'll be like, holy smokes, Chicago ain't that bad, right? They'll be walking down Michigan Avenue, and they're like, I've been in a lot of American cities, and none of them are this clean, right? Downtown is really, really clean. You know, Midwesterners aren't nice, but we're kind. And so if you're lost, somebody's going to help you. If you got a flat tire, we're going to be asking you, man, why you ain't see those nails? What's wrong with you? You can't drive? Why are we jacking your car up, fixing your tire? You know what I'm saying? And I saw that in action with just NASCAR in recent history. And if you look at the post following that, it was so many people who wasn't fans of Chicago talking about Chicago was really, really dope, even in the rain. Right. And so that's a power that perspective and history can give you. And to add on to the fact, I was telling everybody that would listen that Chicago was the first place to ever have an American car race. It was Thanksgiving Day, 1895. They raced from Jackson Park to Evanston. And so if you're a fan of racing, now you're more of a fan of Chicago than you was, because American car racing starts here in our city. And so I use that power of history sometimes to cross bridges. But I also use it to set context, right? Like I'm doing these Inglewood tours, and if you're not from the South Side, you have this perspective about Inglewood as this bad neighborhood. And if you don't know the whole story, then you think it just became bad in a vacuum. When really, no, it was a whole bunch of disinvestment. It was purposeful bad policy aimed at those folks. And when opportunity ain't there, somebody gonna make an opportunity. Most of the time, you ain't gonna be happy with the opportunity that they made, right? If you want it to be on the positive side, at least. And all those things comes from studying history. So I try to demonstrate that in my work.
Brother, you said a mouthful just there, and I love the layers of it. And that's, what, the other thing I feel like, because like as I said, this podcast is about fearless authenticity, finding success in what we truly are, what we're meant to be. And I feel like there's two layers to this in this conversation, because while we're talking about you and your work, we're also talking about Chicago and its identity and how it's perceived by others. What comes to mind for you when I say the words fearless authenticity? And you can answer that in any way, personally, or about your work, or about the city.
I don't know if I can properly answer it, but what I do know is that I like wearing my fitted hat, and I'm gonna have on my J's. Even when I got invited to speak to Michael Bloomberg in Amsterdam about the power of social media, and there needs to be a fearlessness in being okay and who you are, because while I recognize that there's some association with like my aesthetic, right? If I'm going to visit you at a church, I'm gonna take my hat off because that's a place that traditionally doesn't want you to have a hat on. But beyond that, there's a authenticity to me and about me that makes what I do more personable. And if I want me a tweed jacket with the little patch elbows, but that's if I start walking around here exclusively in that, then you're going to be able to tell that that's not authentically me. And then if you don't respect my authenticity, then you're not going to respect the work that comes behind that. And so there's I would describe that as like being willing to be you at all costs. It's Black History Month now, and one of the other part of it is, and I got it from Tamil Black. He said, if you don't have a price, you can never sell out. Damn. So I try not to like, I ain't buyable, I got a fine wife that I don't deserve. The lights work, it's some Wi-Fi in here, so I don't need much else. And keeping that in mind allows me to remain authentic.
Oh, I love that. And I also feel like that's the spirit of our city, right? I think that that's one of the things that, and I think that's actually the reason why everything dope in America comes from Chicago, is because there is a realness about this city. And even all the poets who have, white and Black, who have written about our city, about the writers who love our city. When you describe Chicago, there is a visceral reality to the everyday life here. I don't know if it's because it burned to the ground so many years ago. I don't know if it's because we were, what was it, the pork butcher to the world, whatever, hog butcher to the world. I don't know if it's because we always mucking around and stuff, but there is a real quality in this city that you don't necessarily. I think the only other place that can out-real us, but it's in a whole different way, is New York. Because I think their brashness is part of their brand, but the realness of life in Chicago and the way we present ourselves, I think, and the honesty with which we present ourselves. I remember the first time I went abroad. I was in Paris. That was the first time I had gone, to Europe. And literally every time I said I was from Chicago, somebody was like, bang, bang. Or keep it real, Al Capone, or this, and the realness and the honesty of how we present ourselves, I think, is also part of our legacy as a city and as people, and that imprints on us some kind of way. I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
Yeah, no, I think spaces have an energy, right? It's a reason that there's so many, not just jazz, blues, R&B rappers. So many of them come from Bronzeville. And I think because Bronzeville, like, that's the energy that permeates in that area. If you live there and you sleeping above that soil and you drinking that tap water, like that energy becomes you. And so the same, like, citywide, right? Like that weird realness certainly becomes who you are. The more you're around it, and the more stories you hear that kind of have you in them, right? The more retelling of something that you can connect to. And we all got this, particularly with Chicago, and that's what's so heartbreaking when you mention the migrants, is that this is a migrant city, and that's why I wrote that piece for the Tribe. It was because my grandpa got here in 1929, 1930. Two signs being held at the Illinois Central train station send them back, right? They're taking our jobs. I'm doing a Roseland tour today where we're going to follow the expansion path of what's finally going to be the CTA Red Line extension. And I'm looking up articles of when they tried to do it in the 1960s, but by then it was starting to get Black, and they didn't want Black folks to get all the way that far south. And then you look today, right? And it's like, oh, we don't want the migrants over here, right? And that's the same thing that was said about your people. You absolutely have the right to demand that the city does something for Chicagoans. And you can definitely demand that they do something for Chicagoans first, but it don't have to be a and or, it can just simply be and. Do something for them and do something for us. It don't got to be don't do nothing for them, but do something for us. That's not even like really the Chicago way. We wouldn't be here if we'd have let that continue, and it ain't just Black folks, man. They were closing coal mines in the 1950s. And so in the name of urban development, they were sending the what they called themselves that, not me, the Appalachian hillbillies to Chicago, to the uptown neighborhood. And they still there. Yep. What if we'd been like, nah, we don't want no hillbillies in Chicago, right? What would uptown even look like? They didn't want the Mexicans working at U.S. Steel on the east side. They told them, send them home, right? What would Chicago be without Mexican Americans? What if we would have listened and sent them home, right? Pilsen would suck. Little Village would suck.
The east side would suck. And the east side is underrated, baby. Underrated.
Yeah. You go over there, man, you drive down Commercial. It's such a vibe and a feeling over there.
And the food, fam. Yeah. The food. That's the piece.
Artisanship. I wear a patch jacket. You better believe I go to the Mexican lady to sew my patches on my jacket. And she doing it while she talking crap with me with her hands. Like it's crazy.
I love how you connect it, because this is another example of how history repeats itself. And if we don't know our history, then we are doomed to repeat it and do to other people what has been done to us historically, which I think as we wrap up Black History Month is something really important to remember, because that is what civil rights was really at the base for. It's about all of us trying to work together to make this a better place for all of us, because, what is it they say? I'm not free until we are all free. Yeah. And so we can't have our foot on somebody's neck if we don't want somebody on ours,
Man, I always say we got to stop calling plays out of the oppressor's playbook.
That part.
That's what we are essentially doing. Like, we're mimicking that playbook. That playbook ain't work for us, and that's certainly a divide and conquer sort of thing. And I ain't gonna participate in that, because I know what it'll eventually do to us. What we should be doing is welcoming the migrants and making them civically aware, so that we now have this huge voting block. And if you don't put a school on the South Side when we want it, you ain't gonna win. And then we have this either huge voting block, and if you don't re-put the mental health facilities here, then you ain't gonna be governor. And there's power in collective action.
Indeed. I love it. What is your favorite story about Chicago that you think, or favorite figure from Chicago's history that you think reflects either what you believe about yourself or what you believe about Chicagoans at large?
I'm trying to pencil down one.
I know, right?
So terrible.
I knew you were gonna hate this question. I knew you were.
In the name of time, I'm gonna try to do like a rapid fire. Of course, I would say Tamil Black. He was the liaison for the Chicago cohort on the March on Washington. He was able to organize about 40,000 of us to go to the March on Washington. There's a street organization called the Blackstones. He was the only teacher that Jeff Ford ever really listened to, and he could always calm Jeff down and get him to negotiate in peace. There is this Jewish gentleman by the name of Julius Rosenwald. The Rosenwald Court Apartments is on 47th Street. He found out that there was no new construction for Black people in the 1920s, so he bought an entire city block, knocked it down, and built that building that's still standing today. That whole Rosenwald Court, used to be Michigan Avenue Apartments, was paid for by Julius Rosenwald, as well as the Museum of Science and Industry. And then he built Rosenwald schools that were in the South. 5,100 of them. John Lewis is a graduate. Maya Angelou is a graduate. Between 1920 and 1970, 1/3 of all Black students in the South went to a Rosenwald school. And then, of course, my favorite Chicagoan ever is a dude by the name of Earl B. Dickerson. He's the reason that the very famous Lorraine Hansberry case. So if you watch Raisin in the Sun, they waiting on an insurance check. They moved to a white neighborhood. White neighborhood don't want to let them be there. It's partially a true story. Earl B. Dickerson was the lawyer that took Carl Hansberry's case. He won, and that's the reason why Black people got to live in Woodlawn and Inglewood and Roseland way before the rest of the country had opened up with white flight. So those would be three, just off my head.
I love those stories. I didn't realize, I mean, I knew that Raisin in the Sun was based on their family story. I didn't realize the significance of the law, though. With the timing, because I was, caught up in the story. What do you think? One of the things I love about your tours, which I am going to get to one day, even because I'm on the air most Saturdays when you on, but one day, Dilla, I'm taking a tour. I'm taking one. But one of the things I love about it is how you get Chicago companies to sponsor people to do that. And I know that as a member of one of the D9 organizations, service is at the core of a lot of things you do. What is important to you about being of service to others and using your talents to build the community in the way that you have and spread the word the way that you have? Because the thing is that you're not only doing a service to us as Chicagoans, but also to the country in the way that you talk about us. And now there's like, as a member of the media, I'm really big about having narratives that go against what, I like to have a whole bunch of different sides to things. I'm kind of old school in that one. But how do you see being of service to others and using your gifts in that way?
That's I'm gonna try to get through it without crying. My old man ain't here no more, but he used to say that we're all gonna be laid out in the pine box, dressed nicely, way longer than we're not. And so you're supposed to leave everything you got on the other side of that box. And I think about that all the time. I don't want to leave this earth and I didn't give everything I have. One, just selfishly, if I do that, then it doesn't allow for my kids to have an excuse for them not to do that, right? Sometimes as parents, you want to give them the sermon and they don't see the sermon. So if I'm giving my all and all that I do, when you don't give your all and all that you do, then I can stand 10 toes in your butt. And there's the example of, well, hey, I wasn't just talking. You got to watch. You got to see. And then the other part of it is I really, truly believe a rising tide raises all ships. Amen. And so the better that my city does, maybe the better the Midwest gonna do. The better the Midwest does, the better the country will do. Like we all got to be here together. And there's a million things that people can do to divide us. It's I'm always looking for the things to unite us. It's like, again, I'm always quoting my dad. I had an amazing pops. And the reason why I got like this amazing wife, because he used to say, you can very easily write a list of stuff that you don't want or that you won't take. Write the list of what you will take, right? Right. When picking a mate, if she got the kindest heart on earth, but she can cook, but she can't cook. Is that okay? Or are you going to be focused on the fact that she can't cook? Or are you going to go find somebody that can cook? Because you ain't going to be with nobody that can't cook, but then their spirit is terrible and now you miserable. Like, so, I'm a sickeningly optimistic person. You get on a lot of people's nerve because I'm always finding the bright side of something. And that's hard sometimes in a world where negativity gets you so much more, it appears to get you so much more. But then I'm hoping that people see my example, even about that, right? I could have very easily, with the breadth of knowledge that I have on Chicago history, dedicated my page to negative Chicago stuff, chronicling gang killings, chronicling the mob, chronicling all the corrupt politicians, chronicling all the aldermen who went to jail. I could have very easily went that way, and I probably would have more followers and more views. But because I went positive, the impact is so much richer and so much, like you say, if I went negative, I can't call Nike and say, hey, I want to give away 50 seats on this Inglewood tour. We all pay for the 50 seats. Because I got positive content, they always say, yeah, I can call the Bears, right? And I think that one, this is a good merger of private and public partnership, because these corporations make a lot of money here in Chicago. They should give back. But it shouldn't be the stereotypical make your employees volunteer on their off day at a food bank for one day. And there's so many other ways to give back. Knowledge is power. And I love when I got a 75-year-old lady on the bus from Inglewood that's lived in Inglewood her whole life. And when she get off the tour, she look at me and she say, I didn't know none of that. Like that's my day. Oh man, I'm like floating after that. I know I did my job. So I want to do more of that. I want people to feel inspired about their city, understand the city a little bit more, and want to tell others about it.
And by extension, understand themselves. I love all of that. And as a fellow as I call it, pathological optimist, because that's how my family is. That's how I was raised. I mean, to the point where I didn't know that I was optimistic because there's so many more people optimistic in my family than me. But I love that approach. And I think that's the reason why I first resonated with when I first started following you. I was like, who is this brother from Chicago? I was like, I love this story. I never knew this. And I call myself, when I first moved here, trying to learn, as part of my job, I would go places and know things. And I had friends who grew up here was like, how you even know that? Yeah. Because you're not even from here. And I was like, because I went out and found it. You get what you look for. And I think you are a perfect example of that. All right. I'm getting down to the last couple questions I always ask everybody, last few. What is your proudest achievement so far? And what do you still dream of doing? So that's a two-parter.
I'm a big, huge Jay-Z fan. So I dream of one day at the Harold Washington Library, they got the words of my TikTok wrapped around the building like he had Book of Hov, right? So that's my North Star.
I love it. What are you proudest of so far?
So far, I think I'm proudest of that I was able to use positivity to get 100,000 followers on TikTok, right? Like I'm very, very proud of that.
Yes. And when do you feel like you are at the best, truest, most authentic expression of Dilla? Six-figure Dilla.
That's I would say on that bus, when I'm on that bus, giving tours, answering questions. It's like the tours are like a mixture of like history and my personal life too. Like you say, he's around a lot of comedians. Most of the time they drawing from their personal life. So, I'm always talking about my raggedy kids on the bus and comparing what they do to other Chicago historical figures. So I'm at my best on the bus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dilla. I appreciate your time. I know that Black History Month is a busy time for you. And baby, listen, keep on keeping on, brother. You are doing your work. You are doing the calling that God has put you on this earth for. And
I appreciate you. I'm saying, and giving flowers too, man, God, if you don't know who Jeanne Sparrow is around here, I don't know, but you also like a testament to what can be. I'm always getting in trouble because I be talking junk to the current day disc jockeys on some of the more contemporary news stations. And I'm like, y'all predecessors they was giving Elroy the business. You know what I'm saying? What's the brother name that wrote the Moo Annoying jingle? He also
not Tommy.
Huh?
No, wait. Well, Tommy was the spokesperson for Moo Annoying. Richard Pegee.
They was giving Elroy and Richard Pegee the business at work, right? If somebody had a positive song out, if it wasn't on Elroy's playlist, Elroy was just gonna be pressing a little red button. But the DJs and VJs that I grew up with was like so pro Chicago. They'd take their little one-day suspension, but they gonna keep it pushing. If it was something positive, you ain't pay for the advertising dollars, they was gonna sneak it in there anyway to make sure the Bud Billiken was packed, or make sure your food giveaway drive was packed. So thank you for like always putting your integrity first, and that's why you're still here, because the integrity gonna last.
Thank you, sweetheart. Well, and and I will say this, to give Elroy and Marv credit, they didn't always know the things we knew, but they always supported it when we made a case for it, because the way that we worked was like family. And it was about Chicago being part of our family and over-serving that and making sure that Chicago knew they got love where we were. So, but thank you for listening and recognizing that, because my proudest work, some of my proudest work, like at this point in my life, all the dope things that I've been able to do that people have given me access to, those are some of my favorite years in the business. So thank you for knowing that. It's always cool when you can talk to somebody you know online in real life and the experience is the same. Thank you so much, Dilla, for making time for us during a time that I'm sure is really busy for you. Black History Month, as a historian, has got to be a busy time, and we appreciate it. So, here are some of my highlights from this great conversation with Dilla. Innovation brings criticism, knowing that when you are changing things, that people are going to have something to say about it. Being aware of that is so important. I also love his take on fearless authenticity, this idea that you have to be willing to be yourself at all costs. And the advice he got from Timuel Black: if you don't have a price, you can never sell out. And I never thought about fearless authenticity in terms of not selling out, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. His perspective on raising kids, I think, is also a really great analogy for how we can think about the way we give ourselves permission to grow and change. But the idea of thinking of it like we're bowling and keeping the kids out of the gutter, letting them make mistakes, ask the questions, find their own answers. That is how we grow and move as adults too. But it does start when we're younger and we learn to trust the process, I think, in a different way. And that's a gift that we can give our young people, whether they're our kids or kids that we care about. I also love his perspective on history, especially as we look at where we are at this moment in time as we record this. The second we stop having people that keep the history and can retell the history, we're going to end up making the same historic mistakes. And then other people are going to tell us that it didn't happen. We have to bear witness to the things that happen in this world and talk about it and not bury it, because when we bury it, we are doomed to repeat it instead of healing it. And then I love his optimism because it's something that I share, that I was raised with, but this concept that there are a million things that we can do to divide ourselves, but the fact that he's always looking for the things that will unite us. That is absolutely beautiful, Dilla. And that is the note I'm going to end this on. Thank you for keeping us grounded in our history in your own unique way. And if you want to check him out, go follow him on TikTok, IG, and Twitter, X. For his history updates on a regular basis, and also get on his bus if you're in Chicago with Mahogany Tours, and you might see me on one of those. As we end, I want to thank you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention, for your support. I would not do this without you, and I could not do it without my team. Thank you, Lisa E., Vicky, Wayne, Jess, for all your hard work every week. Please rate, review, download, subscribe, and share this episode wherever you get your podcast, including on YouTube. That's where the video versions live. And I hope that you will share or do some action with it, because that's what helps to expand our reach and get more people on the Fearless Authenticity train. Please join our community. Sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every month. fearlessauthenticity.com is where you can access it. You can also get little tidbits throughout the week on my social media platforms. At Ms. Jeanne Sparrow is where you find me on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. At JM Sparrow is where you find me on Instagram and Twitter X. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you soon.